Voters will have to wait almost 2 more weeks to choose their next leader. Officials have set a presidential runoff for May 28th, saying no candidate crossed the 50% threshold needed to win Sunday's vote. The two candidates headed to the final round are incumbent Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Mr. Erdogan's chief rival is an economist backed by an alliance of several opposition parties. He is among those who say the president is responsible for a struggling economy. Mr. Erdogan's critics also blame him for a lackluster earthquake response that cost lives. But he did better in the polls than many expected, and his party is said to remain the largest in parliament ahead of final results. Let's get more on all this. CNN's Jumana Karachi joins me now live from Istanbul. And Jumana, it's not a win yet for Erdogan. Anything, of course, is possible mathematically, but he's in a strong position ahead of this runoff. So what is your sense on the ground? Is he likely to hold on, to cling on to power here?
Well, I mean, so you have to look at the numbers. Yes, President Erdogan did not get that 50 plus 1% that was needed to get the presidency, but he did do better than what was expected in all the polling that was taking place before these elections. They did have Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the leader of the opposition, in the lead. And now you see that President Erdogan has pretty much come out with that slight lead with more than 49% of the vote. And you've got both sides sounding very confident going into this second round. But a lot of the supporters of the opposition are very concerned that the opposition might not have that same determination amongst its electorate, that same kind of enthusiasm. They went into that first round believing that that win from the first round was possible. Now, you also have that third candidate who was running, an ultra nationalist, Sinan Ogan, and he could potentially emerge from this as a tiebreaker with those 5% votes. Of course, he's been eliminated because only the top two will be headed towards that runoff. And that 5% vote that he managed to garner in this election, what happens to that? It is a combination of disenchanted nationalists who couldn't vote for President Erdogan's alliance. And then you've also got the protest voters who did not agree with the opposition's choice of Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu to lead the opposition into these elections. What happens to that? He spoke earlier to our colleague Becky Anderson. Take a listen to what Sinan Ogan told her.
What we're thinking is all the political parties should exclude terror organizations. We don't have to give our support to either of the parties. There is no such rule. When we first started this race, we thought we need to either win the government or we are going to be the kingmaker, and we are at that status. Political parties like HDP or Huda, we want those candidates not to rely on parties that have no distance between terrorist groups, and we succeeded in that.
And we're going to have to wait and see. Issa, he did say that he is going to be in consultations with the four other parties that are part of his small alliance to see what they decide to do in the next couple of weeks, whether they're going to endorse anyone. But then there's also the question of those who voted for him. Will they be following whatever his decision is, or will they be going their own way? A critical couple of weeks ahead for Turkey, ahead of yet another consequential vote for this country that people would tell you is not just about the next 5 years, but the direction their country is taking.
Indeed, and Ogan there not giving much away, very much playing the role potentially of kingmaker. But look, let's talk about the opposition, because of course all the numbers we've been seeing ahead of this was that they were going to do fairly well. They now have 2 weeks now to wait for this runoff, Jumana. What is the mood right now? Do they fear they will lose momentum? Can they re-energize the population at this stage?
That is going to be the question. That's going to be the big challenge, because there was real disappointment amongst the voters for the opposition, amongst their supporters. They really were expecting something very different. They believe that Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu and this alliance has underperformed. People really had their hope in this united front, this opposition coming together in a way they have never done before. You've had these 6 diverse parties backed by the Kurds as well, all coming together as this one coalition. They were hoping to unseat President Erdogan. Their promise was really speaking to the disgruntlement of much of the population here, promising them change, promising that real democracy under a parliamentary system will come back again under this opposition if they do win. And there was this feeling that they could achieve this. They were promising that they could potentially do this from the first round. Then you had the polls that were coming out on putting Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu in the lead. So right now you have this serious disappointment, but you're also hearing from the opposition saying that they are ready for the second round. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu saying today he's not going anywhere. He is here and here to stay, and he will fight until the last moment. But we will have to see, because, I mean, Isa, yesterday we saw these incredible scenes where you had so many people turning out. Turkey does have a history of high turnout at elections. Yesterday was a record turnout. Nearly 90% of eligible voters were out voting. We saw the elderly being brought into these polling centers on stretchers and on wheelchairs. We spoke to first-time voters who were saying that this was the most decisive election in the history of their country, and they felt that they had an obligation to take part in it. And a lot of people that we spoke to were saying that they wanted change. But clearly, if you look at the results, you see a very divided Turkey. It is really a reflection of the state of polarization in this country. Two very different men, two very different visions for the future of the country, and Turks are very much divided on what Turkey they want to emerge out of this election.
Yeah. And then the work begins of how do you unite the country, like you said, Jomana, that's clearly polarized. Jomana Karachi there for us. Thanks very much, Jomana.